9th of December 2021.
The trial began today for Ghislaine Maxwell.
Targeted and groomed underage girls for Jeffrey Epstein to abuse.
From news.com.au.
I'm Andrew Bucklow, and I've got news for you. Ghislaine Maxwell's trial is arguably the highest profile court case in the world right now. The 59-year-old British socialite is accused of setting up young girls to be abused by her ex-boyfriend Jeffrey Epstein. If you're not familiar with Epstein, he was a wealthy financier and convicted sex offender who had some pretty famous friends. In 2019, he was arrested and charged with sex trafficking and conspiracy. But before his trial began, he took his own life in prison.
Some breaking news right now. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City.
Now, Ghislaine Maxwell, who has been referred to as Epstein's right-hand partner, is facing similar charges. Prosecutors claim that Maxwell won the trust of girls as young as 14 and conditioned them to give nude massages and sex to Epstein. But Maxwell's lawyers say she's being used as a scapegoat and that the crimes were committed by Epstein and not her. Today, we'll get the latest on the trial from a reporter who's been in the courtroom with Maxwell every day. We'll also hear about the secret piece of technology the FBI used to hunt Maxwell down and bring her to justice. And finally, we'll chat to a former FBI agent and master of interrogation who reveal how you can tell if someone is lying to you. Megan Palin is News Corp Australia's US correspondent and has been covering Ghislaine Maxwell's trial in New York. Megan, what charges is Ghislaine facing?
She's facing 6 counts in her federal trial at the moment, and they relate to accusations that she facilitated the sexual exploitation of girls for, of course, her longtime companion, Jeffrey Epstein. There are another 2 charges that she's facing as well around perjury, but they have been now separated from this trial and will be dealt with at another time. Now, of these 6 counts, the most serious one is one around trafficking minors for sex acts. And that one carries the largest penalty, which is up to 40 years in prison. Of all of the 6 counts, the remainder have a max of about 10 years each. So there is what she's facing at the most is a life sentence if she gets the max of all of those. But about 80 years if she was to get the most extreme for each charge.
You've been in the courtroom. What have been the most shocking moments from the trial so far?
There's been a lot of them. I guess the detail around what a lot of the accusers say that they saw in Epstein's properties, the detail around, photographs of naked young women that were all around his home, and some of these were admitted as evidence in the trial, but there were so many of them. I guess the shocking part was not only that he had them there in the first place and that he was so brazen about that, but considering the number of people that he had in and out of his home over all of these years, and high-profile people, powerful people, that they would have also been seeing these, and that on its own didn't raise, I guess, more suspicion than what he was in sort of other areas. But that's certainly been one of them. I guess seeing actually some of those images or having some of them described when they've been admitted under seal has been quite confronting. Again, I guess this also sort of comes back to how brazen he was. But I mean, we've heard from witnesses and accusers about how he'd do things like leave schoolgirl costumes out for them on a bed. Maxwell apparently would help him with this and then kind of instruct the girls who at the time were all quite young teenagers, instruct them to then present themselves to Epstein and sort of encourage them into sexual situations with him. It's been pretty shocking as well just to hear, I guess, the lengths that they allegedly went to, or that Ghislaine allegedly went to with Epstein to lure these girls into their orbit, from sort of, picking people who came from troubled families or had financial difficulties. It sounds like they had quite an eye for picking these people that I guess would be more vulnerable and most susceptible into falling into their trap.
You mentioned that some very powerful people were friends with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. What kind of names have we heard mentioned in court so far?
Look, the legal parties have really steered away from bringing them into it. And the judge made it very clear at the beginning of the trial that this case would be centred on the accusations directly toward Ghislaine Maxwell. However, we have heard some of the names of people they mingled with from the accusers basically mention them for the purpose of saying that, look, Ghislaine Maxwell, she hung around with these people, she was powerful, and as was Epstein, and that's why they felt sort of trapped and like they would have no chance if they came forward with their allegations. There's people mentioned like that who were accused of no wrongdoing in this trial, I probably have to mention, but they've included Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew. They hung around some very high-profile people. And I mean, you don't get much bigger than former US presidents and British royalty. That's a lot of these girls were between 14, 16, 17 at the time they first met Epstein. They say Maxwell introduced them to him, and that one of the big attractions for them, a lot of them have said at the trial, was that she basically convinced them that she could help sort of propel their careers, or she would act like she was befriending them, and they had stars in their eyes, some of them thinking, where she hangs out with these people and now we're sort of one of them. So you could sort of see, or it was interesting to hear that was the original appeal from them, but you can also sort of get a sense of how they got tricked quite easily into, giving Jeffrey Epstein these massages in these rooms that ended up becoming, sexually abusive.
And I assume that Ghislaine has been in the courtroom. What's her demeanour been like?
Yeah, she has. Look, she's been pretty focused. There's been, I would say with the accusers, she has definitely looked at them sort of on and off, never like intense stares or anything like that, but she hasn't avoided giving them contact. And when expert witnesses have testified, you could sort of see that she was paying a lot of attention to that. She's one of 6 siblings and she's the youngest of them, and of those siblings, they're all rotating each day coming to support her in court. So every day she's got at least 2 of them there sitting behind her, and she's most mornings in court as her legal team is sort of getting set up. She sort of talks to them one by one, and they're quite animated, and she's been hugging her legal team most mornings. She has not sort of been overtly emotional. Like, I haven't seen any anger or tears or anything like that. She's been quite controlled. And she has, of course, she hasn't testified. We don't expect that she will. We don't think her legal team is going to put her up for that, because that would obviously open her up to being torn apart under cross-examination. So it's fairly unusual for that to happen in these kind of situations, but you still never know. So we haven't heard from her in the trial, but I know her siblings have given a few press conferences outside the court at the end of the day, and they're still pushing for her to have better conditions within the jail. We've heard that she's been in there for 17 months now while awaiting this trial, and she and her legal team have reported that there's like rats in her cell. She's having lights put on her every 15 minutes to make sure she's not trying to take her own life as Epstein did. We've seen photos of her with a black eye, not quite sure how she got that, but they've been giving press conferences sort of trying to push for her conditions to be improved, and they're apparently going to the UN about that now. But look, she's definitely been very interesting to watch.
Yeah, let's have a listen to what Ghislaine's brother Kevin told the ABC in America earlier this week.
And we don't want this daily torture to continue. Get rid of the shackles and feed her. She is not being fed. She had a day with no food at all. She's in from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. when she gets back to her cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center. And on most days, she gets a boiled egg. She is lucky if it's not moldy. She gets a couple of pieces of stale bread. She gets a banana. That's it.
This trial is in the 2nd week at the moment. How long is it expected to go for?
Initially, they were saying that they thought it would go for at least 6 weeks. But we're thinking now it could actually be a bit shorter than that. The prosecution has actually just indicated today that they think they're likely to wrap up or to rest their case by the end of this week, which will be the end of the second week, which is obviously going to be speeding things up much more so than what we thought earlier. So, I don't know, 6 weeks at the most, but it looks like, there's a chance it could go perhaps finish a bit before that now.
Ghislaine Maxwell went to ground after the death of Jeffrey Epstein in 2019. She quickly became one of the most hunted people on the planet, with the Sun newspaper in the UK offering an $18,000 reward for information which directly resulted in them being able to contact Maxwell in person. She hired ex-SAS soldiers to keep her safe and allegedly hired body doubles to trick the media into thinking she was actually in different countries. The FBI were determined to find her, and after they were granted a GPS warrant, they were able to track a mobile phone Maxwell had been using and discovered she was hiding out somewhere in the US state of New Hampshire. The FBI then got a warrant to use a secretive device called a Stingray to pinpoint Maxwell's exact location. They arrested her inside a secluded mansion on July 2nd.
For the first time, details about what happened when FBI agents showed up to arrest Ghislaine Maxwell at this 156-acre New Hampshire property. Prosecutors say she tried to flee to another room in the house. Agents were ultimately forced to breach the door. Inside the home, agents say they found a cell phone wrapped in tinfoil on top of the desk, a seemingly misguided effort to evade detection from law enforcement trying to trace her phone.
To explain what a Stingray device is, I'm joined by Morgan Wright, a cybersecurity and terrorism analyst who is the chief security advisor for SentinelOne.
Yeah, Andrew, what Stingray is, it is a cell site simulator. Basically, it fools cell phones into locking onto that so that it can determine the IP of the phone, where the phone's at. It's used by even hostile adversaries like Russia, China, to intercept text messages and phone calls. So what it does is it fools phones into connecting to it so they can get precise information and location without having to go through the service provider. So it's actually a great tool. It's built by a company called Harris Corporation here in the U.S., but it has a lot of power, so it has to come with a lot of rules as well.
So how accurately can it pinpoint someone's location?
They won't officially say, but I will tell you that if I can pull up an app and pull up Lyft or Uber and it can find me precisely, like as you might say down there, within a couple meters, you can guess from there. So it's pretty accurate in terms of narrowing down the signal. May not get you to the exact spot, but it can put you close enough to the area to where you eliminate everything else. And it was the only house out there, so it's the only signal within, a couple hundred meters. Pretty obvious that's where the signal's coming from.
And can anyone buy one of these machines, or is it limited to law enforcement?
These things are highly regulated by, like, say, Harris Corporation, military, the intelligence community, law enforcement. You have to have a legal reason to possess one of these normally. But that doesn't mean that they don't show up in the hands. There are some black market versions or people who have stolen them, and repurposed them. Or the other thing too is if you've got the money like Russia and China, you can build kind of your own version, which actually happened in the United States. I live in the National Capital Region, Northern Virginia, by the U.S. Capitol. They have found some of those sites that they believe were put up by some hostile foreign intelligence agents attempting to intercept calls from the State Department, from the White House, things like that.
Whenever you Google the Stingray device online, there isn't that much information. Is it something that law enforcement tries to keep quite secretive?
The fact that the Stingray exists is not a secret, but what they do want to keep confidential is how it's used, who's using it, what are some of the specifications of it, because anytime you put that information out there, then it means it's easier for adversaries. And I'm talking more than just nations. I'm talking about, if you think about what we're dealing with now with the cartels, with human trafficking, with the things that are going on between Mexico and places like that, it is a very real issue that somebody could lock in on this or understand how to defeat it. So, yeah, they tend to keep details about its production, about what it's like. They tend to keep those details minimum. Why? Because they have a select number of customers. They don't really need to advertise a lot. More of it that's out there is just to have a minimum presence, but it's not secret, but they do keep the information about it as tightly controlled as possible because of legal issues and court proceedings.
We contacted police sources in Australia to ask if Stingray devices are used here by our law enforcement as well. And while they wouldn't speak on the record, they did confirm that they do have access to similar machines. Okay, moving on now. After being caught, Ghislaine Maxwell was interviewed by the FBI. Jeff Lanza was an FBI special agent for over 20 years, and he's also a graduate of the world-renowned John E. Reed School of Interviewing and Interrogation. He joins me on the line now. Jeff, how can you tell someone is lying?
There's a lot of giveaways if someone's lying. It could be eye contact or lack of eye contact. It could be small gestures that people make. It could involve facial gestures. It could involve leg movements, arm movements. But sometimes people can be very good liars. And if people are good at lying, then you're not going to see as many as those type of things.
Is there one kind of tip that you could give us? So if we think our partner or something like that is lying to us, is there a little tell that we could pick up on? Is there an eyebrow that goes up, or do their eyes go a certain way when they're telling a lie?
Two things. So you're looking for inconsistencies between verbal and nonverbal. So if someone is telling you the truth and they say, yes, that happened, they would generally nod their head, nod it in an affirmative direction, like, yes, that happened. Or no, that didn't happen, they would shake their head. But if it's the opposite of that, they say, yes, this is what happened, but they're shaking their head. If there's a conflict between the verbal and the nonverbal, always believe the nonverbal, because we can't control that as easily as we can. We can control our words, but we can't control our nonverbal as easily. And also, second thing, eyes. So generally people look up to the right, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, it doesn't matter. If you look up to the right, then you're accessing the creative part of your brain. You're making up a story. If you look up to your left, you're accessing the analytical part of your brain, and you're relying upon memory. So looking up to the left, you're telling a true story. Looking up to the right, you're making up a story. And this plays out so many times. You can see people in various situations that lying, you're looking up to the right, telling the truth, you're looking up to the left.
I don't know about you, but I cannot wait to start catching people out with those lie detecting techniques. I'll be like, oh, do I look good in these jeans? Oh, your eyes are going up and to the right. Interesting. Thanks for listening to today's episode of I've Got News for You, and don't forget you can stay up to date on the latest from Ghislaine Maxwell's trial at news.com.au. I'll catch you later.